evolution of school food. We will have Stina Algotsson and Magnus Naess here on stage. Welcome. Good to see you here. And then we have Eva Kvanta and Dan Giusti with us through the digital universe out there. And we can just briefly mention here that Stina, your chair of something called the BFUF, which is an R&D fund, dealing with tourism and hospitality. And then, of course, you're an avid food advocate when it comes to something called sapere. You have to tell me, what is sapere? Lovely.
But Supper is also an international network where we gather researchers and practitioners who are interested in sensory science and in food and in children, of course.
Wonderful. And Magnus Naess, you're Sweden's leading school chef.
Am I? Thank you.
Well, I think people say so. And,
yeah, okay. Yeah.
I know it makes you when you read about what stuff you do, you want to go back to school again in order not to skip lunches, but to skip all the other classes in order to just eat lunches. I think you're the head chef at Globala Gymnasiet,
yeah.
and of course a great proponent for better school food.
Sure.
So good to have you. You brought a book along. What is that?
Yeah, I wrote a cookbook. I had a year off and wrote a cookbook which is called Vegolyftet.
Which is all about vegetarianism.
Yeah, it's more like a tool instead of it's not a kitchen table. You don't have it on your coffee table.
Okay.
It's more like a tool for people who works professionally with school food, how to veganize their kitchen. I could have written on it using eggs and milk, but I found that perhaps try to strive for making it gluten-free and vegan just to prove a point. And yeah.
Lovely. And we have also Eva Kvanta here from White Guide Junior Edition, and you're also one of those people pushing for better food in schools out there. And thank you so much for your good work. Eva, did you bring a book today?
I have one next to me. Hang on. Here we go.
Yes, this is it. The White Guide Junior, the best school meals in Sweden. White Guide is, of course, the... every year you give us a guide to the best tables in Sweden, and also now the best school tables in Sweden. I think that's a beautiful thing. And then, Giusti, you have an illustrious career behind you, I must say, going from being head chef at Noma, and no one in this room or in this audience doesn't know what Noma is. The best restaurant in the world for like a zillion years in a row. But then you got tired and you started what?
Yeah, so I started a company called Brigaid, which we are putting professional chefs, or at least encouraging professional chefs to get into working in public school food service programs. So we've been doing that for 5 years now.
So who's tasting your food these days?
Very discerning customers. So basically children from the ages of 4 to 18. So we are doing our best. As everyone on this panel can speak there, they can be the most difficult customers, that's for sure. Receive probably more harsh feedback now than I ever have in my whole career.
But also the most rewarding customers that you have, given 100%. That you are able to actually influence them tremendously. So this panel is all about school food. Let's talk about schools and food. First of all, I need to ask you, Dan, what's the status in the US when it comes to school food?
Just to put it in perspective, our budget at the moment is $3.51 for the whole meal. So that's for food, that's for labor, maintenance, everything, which usually leads to about $1.25 that we have for the food itself. So you can imagine that that does make it quite challenging in terms of what we actually can provide on the plate. Beyond that, many of the schools are not very well equipped in terms of equipment, infrastructure, kitchen spaces themselves. So those two things combined make it really challenging to make a great meal. So there's no question that a lot of schools do struggle to produce meals that we would consider as really high quality. So there's a lot of folks trying to make great school food, but within those parameters, it's very challenging. And then to add to that, it's very rare, as everybody on this panel knows, that people who are trained as chefs or people who are trained to cook choose this profession. So all of those things combined make it really difficult to produce quality meals. So we're trying to change that.
That's wonderful. You have any success so far?
Definitely. As I mentioned, there are a lot of great people out there already doing the work. So adding a chef to a school district or a kitchen really kind of allows that kind of meal to take it to the next level. So we are definitely having success. That being said, it is slow. As we all know, working in a school system is very different than working, say, in an independent restaurant in terms of the way things have to happen. It's a bureaucracy. It can be a little slow moving. But we've definitely seen success. And the way I look at it is even one child, if you can kind of change the way they eat or think about food, or for that matter, even make them have just a better day than they were facing before, then you've been successful.
Lovely. So, Magnus, you could arguably be a chef at any restaurant out there. Why did you choose to cook in schools?
Well, for me, it was more like a personal vendetta for the horrible school food I ate as a child. So it was all those things that Dan describes about, unequipped kitchens and no money for food, and also very. I don't think the professionals, they weren't so professional. So I see that I see it's very rewarding to work with this now, because I can bring something more than a paycheck home. It's very fulfilling.
Yeah, and I totally understand the vendetta, because when I grew up, which is a long time ago, school food was really
It
bad.
was.
And you never had it basically.
Yeah.
Because it was so disgusting. And what do you think? What happens when someone doesn't eat their school lunch?
Well, first I think they go to the pizzeria or McDonald's or something. So they cover a big hole in their wallet or their parents' wallet, because the food is already paid for via taxes, but they go and eat something else instead. So firstly, I think, and they don't get the social thing that you go to the cantina and speak to people and meet people. So you get that aspect, but also you don't get nutritious food if you go to the fast food places. So it's a big problem. We have to attract the audience to come to the school food cantina and eat there instead.
Or if you don't have that budget, you eat nothing, right?
Yeah.
And that also affects your school results in a very
negative
way.
Big time. That's a very big issue. Tired pupils, and they come and, do you have some fruit, when it's like 2:00 and we're cleaning the place up? Okay, but besides that, they need something, real food that lasts all day, not quick calories. They need something that really makes them.
Stina, you're nodding here. What do you think about school food? How important is that?
I think it's extremely important. In Sweden, Finland, and Estonia, we have, like you say, free school lunches. They are, of course, paid by taxes. The only 3 countries in the world, I think. And yesterday, I saw some new research where they have found out that kids who have school meals, like free school meals, they grow taller and they earn more money later on in their lives. So we have some Swedish researchers from Lund who have just found out that. So of course it's important, but I think maybe the school lunch is the most important for the kids who are the most vulnerable. For some, it's the only hot meal during the day. So of course, for those, it's more important than for maybe in general.
Yes.
So.
Eva, how come you started White Guide Junior?
So the White Guide Junior was started in 2013. And like everyone else, we were slightly influenced by Jamie Oliver. And also by the fact that the organic revolution had already started taking off in Sweden. So it was kind of boiling everywhere. You had schools attracting pupils because they were serving food made from scratch with locally produced ingredients. So it was actually already starting, but the lowest level was still very, very low. You still had these poor ladies opening up boxes, zero creativity, zero happiness. And what we wanted to do was to raise the bar, kind of the lowest level, by highlighting the positive examples. So we are very, very careful not to slag anyone off, because the conditions are different, the politicians think differently, but we really want to inspire everyone. So pretty soon, the competition grew from just giving awards to the best school restaurants to also giving prizes to the best politicians, the best headmasters, the best municipality, basically showing everyone that a brilliant chef alone can't change the world. It has to be like a collaboration between society, between the parents, the children. So it's grown and grown. And that was a very long answer to a short question.
So maybe I'm thinking of like, can you measure the quality of a society in the school lunch canteen?
You can measure the willingness of the society to kind of unify people through food. But also, I mean, I've seen amazing, because what we do is we travel all over Sweden and test hundreds of restaurants, not only school restaurants, but also preschools and retirement homes. And some of the greatest examples of how school canteens, or restaurants as we prefer to call them, can actually make a difference, we found in these really poor areas where it's like really a community thing, and where, I mean, rather like you, Dan, I think, work, where you can really, really make a difference.
I have to ask a question it's kind of pesky in a sense, but is food... Okay, let me back a little here. We pay in society for, police and fire brigades, etc., through the tax bill. Should we also be provided food that's quality assured and available to all? Because food is so important that it sometimes perhaps isn't possible to outsource it to people.
Should we do this to all of our citizens, you mean? Not just school children?
Yeah. Some extent, Because it's a question of, should schools first, should they serve all meals? Or make those all meals available at least? And of course, the prolongation of that question is, should society itself be providing food in a greater extent to people, not just to, for the poorest parts of it, food stamps, etc.? Dan, I'd like to have your thoughts on this, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think the short answer to your question is yes. In the United States, meals that are offered in schools right now are breakfast, lunch, and then They refer to it as supper, even though it's a meal that's right after school ends. So currently 3 meals are available in schools. That being said, you do have to qualify to receive a free meal. So a lot of kids who are coming from households that really they do need those free meals, they don't qualify for them. Our school lunch program is based off of the poverty line in the United States. The poverty line right now in the United States is $12,000 per household for one person, and it increases about $4,000 for every person. So it's very low. It's too low. So there are a lot of people, a lot of children who don't qualify for free meals who absolutely do need them. So there is legislation in the mix now for universal free meals, like was mentioned before, so that every student would have access to free meals. I think that's essential. I think most people in this country who work within school food would argue that it is essential, because there are many, many, many students who will not eat much between the time that they leave school and the next morning. And that's not okay. It's not okay at all. So I would say yes to your question. Beyond students in society, should we be providing free food to people? I mean, that's a big question. And I think at this point, at least here, starting with students in schools, that's a big lift. And if we can figure out how to provide free meals to all students, I think that's a great start.
I totally agree. I retract my question here. I rephrase it and let's focus just on schools. Here in Sweden, we're so proud about this one meal that we serve every day. Should we extend this to the other meals as well? Stina?
Actually,
No, I definitely don't think so.
Why not?
Because I agree with Dan. If you are from a situation where you cannot get food, of course, it's important for a child to get nutrition. But I think the meal has so much of a social aspect, and the meal is also a gluing kit for a family. And if you want to take away the responsibility and the reason to have a family, you should take away or you should serve all meals from the state. But I think the meal, you learn a lot, and you also need to work with a meal and share the meal in a family context, not only in the school context.
Yeah, but if it's you don't have to.
What do you mean?
I mean, you don't have to eat in school. It's just availability here, I think.
You mean if it should be available for those who want? That's a difference.
Yeah.
That's a difference. For those who need, it would be probably great, but people are also a bit lazy. A lot of people would choose that option and then lose the option to share a meal with a family.
Perhaps you can bring the families to school after school and have a meal there.
It sounds a little bit like a Marxist choice, or?
I don't know. If the school food, if Magnus cooks, I think I'd like to go there and have his food instead of mine. I think my family would agree.
You can ask Magnus.
Yeah, I think the question is not absurd, but I think it wouldn't work because people want to have the family gathering. So I'm totally with you there. But I think I know also that the situation in like the United States, it's different. We live in different societies. We have different structures. And I've been looking a lot about, on nutritionists and how they work in the States. So I see that there's a different need there. And there's a need here, of course, also. But I think catering, we could sell catering to families, sure. But it shouldn't be free because,
Eva, you have a question here.
I just wanted to say that a lot of schools already serve breakfast, and of course also a very healthy snack for the kids who stay longer. And the option to buy takeaway is available at some schools. But I agree that to have dinner without your family is kind of depressing thought, actually, unless
Okay.
it's absolutely necessary.
Okay, let's refrain from that one. Well, even though, well, I do understand that there is a difference here. We have a question from the audience. It says, why can't school kitchens grow their own food? Maybe some percent of it to start with, and then possibly detach that from low profits for chefs' open kitchen for everyone. I think the question is really, you know, can we start to grow things in schools and then use that produce, you know, for the school kitchen, and then perhaps go from there. I mean, if schools can start to grow food and cook food, and perhaps they can become restaurants in society. Dan, what's the situation in the US? I know that there's a lot of efforts going on in building school gardens.
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of school gardens, and there are a lot of schools that talk about the fact that they have school gardens. The fact of the matter is, I mean, the average school that we work in has about 600 students. Some of the schools we're in have 2,000 students. To be able to actually, in any real tangible way, produce food, grow food that you could actually feed that many people with, you would need a farm. Most of these school gardens are very small, and they're very good learning tools. You can show students how things grow, and that's usually what they're used for. What we see a problem is, though, oftentimes, because it's easier to plant a small garden than it is to change the food you're serving in the school, we see a lot of schools that are serving very, very low quality prepackaged foods, yet they're showing kids how vegetables grow. So kids learn how vegetables grow, then they're taken into the cafeteria only to eat chicken nuggets and chicken patties and these kinds of processed things. So there's a big disconnect. So I think it's great. But what I would say is the starting point, because in the end of the day, we're talking about money. It's all about money, having enough money to do things. So for me, is gardens, growing food is exciting to people. It sounds sexy. People want to talk about it. Nobody wants to talk about training in the kitchens or a new oven or a new piece of equipment, but it's usually the very practical things and the boring things that are going to make the most change. So as much as growing food is exciting, I think if money is going to be spent anywhere, and I'm sure Magnus would agree, it's prioritizing probably making these kitchen spaces more appropriate for making quality food. So I would say there's a starting point, and then getting to the growing of food maybe is next.
Okay, so I'm an economist. I tend to see the world in numbers and diagrams. And when I think about food and children, I just see, it's mind-boggling that all these super high return investments that we can make into kids by giving them good food, how come it's not happening? I just can't understand it. And what is the reason? Is it because we're talking about children here, and it's only basically their mothers, and you don't have to bother about them? Let's build a car factory instead. Why is it? Can someone give me an answer, please?
Well, I think there is a difference, firstly, between Sweden and the US. I mean, the average number of the percentage of organic produce served in schools in Sweden today is like 38% average, and an increasing amount of schools are baking bread every day. I'm sure Magnus wouldn't agree that.
Yeah, but I do agree with you. I do agree with you, but this is not a question of Sweden. It's a question of the world.
Okay. So
how come the world doesn't serve its most important future people good food? Dan, what do you think?
I mean, I think part of it. I mean, I've heard adults say this. As you said, as we all said, okay, we grew up eating school food that wasn't very good. There are people who genuinely think of it like, well, it's like rite of passage, like growing up and being in a school and eating food that's not very good is kind of like what happens. And there's people who genuinely don't think it's that big of a problem. But honestly, I think there's a lot of things. And one of them, because I think you can argue there's many reasons why that's the case, and I'll focus on one, is just that there are not a lot of people who are trained to cook who choose this profession. I mean, we've seen little successes here and there, just not with more money, but just with people who are trained to cook. I know in the United States, it's very rare to go into a school where there are people who have been trained to cook. And if you're not trained to cook and you have to make a meal that fits nutritional guidelines, and you have to make a meal with little money, and you have to make a meal in a kitchen that's very ill-equipped, and you don't have someone who's trained, it's very difficult. You put someone who's trained, it becomes much easier. So I know for me and our company, a big thing we're trying to do is just, I came from Noma, so there's young chefs who see, okay, well, he was at Noma. Maybe cooking in a school is something that I want to do, or cooking in a senior center, or cooking in a hospital. So I think one of the reasons is encouraging people who know how to cook and who want to cook as a profession to actually choose this as a profession.
Stina, agree?
Yeah, I agree totally. And I also think I'm an economist also, and you can talk about costs. And school food has been looked upon as a cost for many years. But the last maybe 10 years, I think there is a shift in Sweden again, where you see the investment. There is a difference between a cost and an investment. If an investment you take care of carefully, and you see it as a long-term investment, and then you have to talk about it as an investment. So how do you value school food? And I think we have started to talk about school food and school canteens in a different way. It's not perfect the way we talk, but also when you talk about it in a different way, you also get good chefs wanting to go there, because it's about the status of working there. So you can change, you can make a shift in a way, the way you talk about things.
Yeah,
I think
Absolutely.
it's super important, and that when you talk about the school food at home and in the school in a positive way, kids will hear that. If you talk about it as a cost and a problem, they will hear that. So I think it's extremely important what language we use and what value we put into things.
totally with you.
The carrot can be looked upon in is this a good carrot, or is it an investment or a cost?
Yeah, but we need kitchen heroes, and
Yeah.
and I can see that we're attracting better chefs like Dan here, and perhaps me, I don't know. But we have to make this kind of work attractive for more people, and we have to get the more kitchen heroes, because they need perhaps more pay, perhaps better status. And I think if they kind of signal that to the kids, that they are kitchen heroes, then the kids will see them as that, and they will remember them like that when they're old. Oh, I want to be like him. And then we'll have new generation of chefs coming in.
I'm the editor of a magazine called Magasin Måltid, which also revolves around school restaurants. And I just did an article on recruitment. I talked to a number of cities in Sweden, and they all agreed that during the past years, it's become increasingly easy to employ and attract really, really good chefs. Typically guys with beards and tattoos who've been working in high class.
Yeah, well, I'll become a chef any day.
For example, in Malmö, which is the city where I live, they only hire trained chefs now for the school restaurants, and they hire loads because they're building many schools. And I think he said that every spring and every autumn, they hire about 10 chefs, and they get about 150 applicants every time. And it's actually become very attractive. And I think it's not only due to White Guide Junior, of course, but there are a number of competitions where you, and also other ways to make this work. I mean, this profession, school chef, something pretty cool and glamorous, like you're an everyday hero. And this is exactly what Dan is doing, I think, but in a different way. Just
Wonderful. School chefs, the glamorous heroes of the future, give them enormous budgets, put the results of the school meals on the balance sheet instead of the P&L, and make sure that the next gen gets the best opportunity for living their lives to the fullest. Thank you, panelists, for joining me today, and thank you for all the good work you're doing. Looking forward to more discussions of school food in the future. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I throw you off stage, and in order to go to the next panel here. Thank you, Dan and Eva. So, school meals, and as Dan testifies, rite of passage. I've been through that rite of passage, and so have so many other people out there over the years. We need to put an end to that, and let's make sure that we all promise each other to reevaluate school food and make sure that it's the best food you can have.